Hey everybody, Matt here for Imagine Then Make. Thanks for stopping by and welcome to part 6 of my Blender video tutorial series. At the end of part 5, we rendered a whole bunch of still images, PNG images, which I then stuck into a separate video editor to create an MP4 file. This time around, we're going to skip a few of those steps and just create the MP4 file right inside of Blender. Alright, so in part 5 I have this checkered cube and I created this real simple animation. I just kind of rolled it up this line and back down. The animation is 120 frames long. And then what I did was I rendered out 120 still images, PNG file images. And you can see they're all right here. This is what we did in part 5, 120 images. And then what I did was I took all of these images and loaded them into my separate video editor so I could create this real simple animation. And at the end of that part 5, I also posed the question, well, what if you didn't have a video editor? And I suggested you could use the built-in video editor that comes on Windows 10. But what if you wanted to just create one simple video clip like this? Could you do the whole thing inside of Blender? And the answer is yes. So let me show you how to do that. So I'm going to load in the part file for this, the model for this particular part. Okay, so here it is, the same sort of checkered cube, and I have the same 120 frames for my animation, and I have the same rolling up and rolling down. Okay, so what if I just want to create an MP4 file, a video file that I could post online or send to a friend or something? So how do you do that right inside of Blender? Okay, so right under, in the Properties editor, in the output properties, if you scroll down, you hit this little box right here under file format. And previously, when we rendered out PNG files, we had this selected, PNG. And I think at the time I probably had RGBA selected, but RGB would have worked as well. And then I left all of these settings alone. I didn't change anything else. Now to create an MP4 file, I'm going to select, instead of PNG, I'm going to select FFmpeg. FFmpeg. Say that 3 times fast. I'm going to select that, and that gives you another option over here for container. So I'm going to drop down this list, and I'm going to choose MPEG-4. And then these are the rest of my settings right here. I'm going to use the video codec of H.264. That seems to work pretty well. Medium quality, good for encoding speed, and so on. Everything is set just this way. Then when I go ahead, and before I actually render, I want to tell Blender where to place the file, the MP4 file that it's going to create for me. So I'm going to navigate to part 6 of this Blender tutorial, and that's the big long folder name that I've set up for myself. Okay, so I'm going to accept that. I'm going to go up to render, hit render animation. So you can see it's moving the cube 1 frame at a time, creating another image, and when it gets all done, it's going to create the MP4 file. Okay, the rendering has been completed. Let me move over to the folder where the new MP4 file was stored. So there it is. I'm going to open the file, and there it is. There's my MP4 file, my video file, produced completely inside of Blender. I didn't need any separate external video editor or any other tools. I just used Blender to create this single MP4 file. So let's have a little bit of fun with this. Now that we know how to do this, let's just play with the animation a little bit. What I'm going to do is, well, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to save my model as a slightly different name. And what I'll do is I'll just increment the date. Okay, so that's the new name of the model. Haven't changed anything yet. So now let's go down to the timeline. I'm going to box select this keyframe and I'm going to move it to position 96. Close. I almost dropped it in the right spot on the first try. Okay, so now my first keyframe, well, second, my first keyframe is right here. My second keyframe is right here, and then my third keyframe didn't move, it's right here. So just for fun, let's play this animation now, and you'll see how moving the keyframes changed it a little bit. Okay, so that's kind of cool. So now let's go ahead and we're going to create a new folder, because what we're going to do is we're going to re-render this now that I've changed the model a little bit. I'll call this output 2. Okay, I'm going to switch back to Blender, and in my options folder here I'm going to select output 2 is where I want to stick the new MP4 file that I want to create. So that's the big long folder name, output 2, the folder I just created. And I've got my keyframe moved. I'm still at 120 frames. Let's go ahead and hit render. So now it's going to take quite a few more frames to get all the way into the path, because the end of the path, because I moved the keyframe. But then it'll take a shorter number of frames, a fewer number of frames to roll all the way back. So I'll be back in a minute as soon as the animation is completed. Okay, the second animation finished, so let's go ahead and switch over to where that's stored. Output 2, right? There's my MP4. Let me go ahead and play it. Okay. All right, so that worked great. All right, so let's try one more thing here. I'm going to go back and I'm going to add one more folder, output 3, because I want to show you what can go wrong. All right, so I'm back in my same model. My animation works fine. Okay, everything's honky-dory. I've got my FF, MPEG, everything's the same, MPEG 4, and so on. Let's go down to here under post-processing. So if for some reason you have, let's say, the sequencer checked, and I'm not at this point in my, I'm not at the point in my Blender journey to really understand what these do. So I can't explain it, but I do know that if this is checked, and I go ahead and I save my model, and then I try and, well, let's change our render output to go to output 3, that new folder that it just created. Okay, output 3. Now if I go up to render and render animation, look at what I get. Nothing but black screens. And you can see it's counting frames. It just counted up to 120 frames. So now if I switch back over and I look in output 3, there's my MP4. So we tried to do something. If I open it, this is all that I get. Black screens. So let me show you how to fix this. We're just going to uncheck what we had checked before, right down here under post-processing. So I don't even have my cube selected or anything, okay? If I uncheck sequencer, everything else stays the same. I'm going to save my model. I'm going to leave the output going to output 3, or output, yeah, folder name output 3. Okay, and this time I'm going to hit render, render animation, and now it's rendering again. So a check mark in that sequencer box is going to cause your render not to work. All right, so there's a little heads up. Okay, so I think we can see, hopefully you can see, that so far in this video series I've shown you how to modify the default cube by using the loop cut and then color the different faces, and then creating a real simple animation. First we rendered out still images, and now in this part we've rendered out an MP4 file, okay? Without any extra tools, just within Blender. So that's pretty cool, I think. But what if you want to have several different video clips? What if I wanted to take this model and I wanted to maybe change the view of the angle and create another video clip? So now maybe I have several different video clips of my model moving, and then I want to piece them all together to make one MP4 file. How could I do that just using the tools in Blender? Well, I think the answer is to go ahead and render your MP4 files just as I've shown, but then take all the separate video clips and load them into the video editor that comes with Blender. And so in the next part of this video series, that's exactly what we're going to do.